One of the things that I try to stay away from doing on this channel is talking about things that I have not used and things that I don't own. But today I do want to talk about something that I am very excited about, and that is Tamron's announcement of the 35 to 150 f2 to 2.8. And I want to give a couple reasons why I'm very excited about this lens. But first, I do want to talk about just kind of the history of variable aperture lenses and why they haven't been so exciting to me before and why this lens is exciting to me now. Typically, when you have a variable aperture lens, it starts off at something like 2.8, and then as you zoom to, longer focal lengths, you lose light as you go. So typically what lens companies do to keep the price of those zoom lenses down is they'll start somewhere around, on the cheap end, like 3.5, and it'll go to 6.5 or something like that. Sometimes if you can get a lens that starts at a 2.8, you're going to pay a little bit more, and then that variable aperture lens becomes like a 2.8 to a 4. And most times on these variable aperture lenses, the most light that you get is usually only around the widest or the front end of that zoom range. So Tamron has already made before, not for the Sony E-mount system, a Tamron 35 to 150, which was a 2.8 to 4 to a f4. And what I imagine is that the 2.8 was only a 2.8 somewhere around the 35 to 40 millimeter mark. And then once you got up to a close to, that 50 millimeter mark, you're probably looking at a 3.5. And so what makes this lens that Tamron has just announced for the Sony E-mount system so exciting is that it starts at a f2, and even if the f2 is only an f2 at 35 millimeters and it changes to 2.8 at around the 40 millimeter mark, you still essentially have a 2.8 zoom lens from the focal lengths of 35 millimeter up to 150. Now, why is that important? The important part of that zoom range is that you essentially get 5 lenses in one zoom lens, and you're able to keep those 5 focal lengths at 2.8. So you get a 35 millimeter, a 50 millimeter, an 85 millimeter, a 105, and a 135, 2.8 throughout the lens. Someone who is a prime shooter like myself, who likes to use prime lenses, those are the really popular focal lengths. Those are the focal lengths that people really seek out, right? You know that most people love shooting at 35. You know that some people live on 50s. 85 just happens to be my favorite focal length. 105, you hear Manny Ortiz talk about that focal length all the time. And then a 135, mid telephoto range is just a great focal length to shoot at when doing portraits. And so just being able to have those 5 focal lengths in one lens system just blows my mind, especially when you think about getting all of those focal lengths at 2.8 aperture. And so if Tamron is able to get this lens to be as amazing as they have with their track record with the 1735, the 17 to 28 f2.8, the super popular 28 to 75, and the super popular 70 to 180, if they're able to have the same image quality, the same focusing speeds, if they're able to get this lens to reach the heights of those lenses, this lens is going to be amazing. The second thing that makes this lens really, really exciting for me is I talk about Sony's price of entry for full frame cameras all the time. I've made 2 videos on it now, 3 I think if I talked about it during my A7C review. But the price of entry for full frame is getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And so if you are someone who is coming from an APS-C system or a Micro Four Thirds system, or if you're just someone who has been thinking about switching over to Sony because you've heard about the autofocusing systems and things like that, and you're thinking about the A7 II, which you can probably get for about $900, probably even cheaper if you find it used, or if you're thinking about the A7 III, which you can get for about $1,400 now if you buy a used, being able to buy this Tamron 35 to 150 along with those cameras puts you into the full frame system, and you essentially have a built out kit in one zoom lens. And honestly, you would never have to buy another lens, because this lens, if Tamron keeps with their stellar quality that they have a track record for now, you're set, you're solid. And so when I think about what I personally would pay for this lens, I think if Tamron is able to price this lens somewhere between the $1,400 and the $1,600 mark, or even the $1,400 and $1,800 mark, I think the value that you have just in knowing that you would never have to change a lens on a shoot. If you are a wedding photographer, this is the perfect photography lens. Just knowing that you would never ever have to change a lens because you have those 5 focal lengths in this zoom lens. The value of that lens at $1,400 to $1,800 would be just mind-blowing. So to be frank, this is not a lens for me. I am happy with my prime lenses. I also own the 28 to 75 and the 70 to 180 by Tamron. So my kit is pretty well built out. But if I were someone who was thinking about moving into full frame, and I was asking myself, you know, what is the quickest road to getting into full frame and having a kit that I can count on for anything that I was going to shoot, Sony just seems to have that market cornered. And so that is the video. That's what I'm excited about. If Tamron is able to keep this lens as sharp and as fast focusing, just the quality that they have with the other 3 zoom lenses, and they're able to get the price between $1,400 and $1,800, I don't know if it were me that I would be looking at other systems. Now, that's not to say that, you know, the RP by Canon isn't a great system, but RF glass is really, really, really expensive. And unless you're someone who has access to the EF glass that Canon has, and you want to adapt lenses, you're still not getting a lens that has all of those focal lengths in one lens at essentially a 2.8. And you're not getting anything like that from Nikon or Panasonic. So that's what I'm excited about. Tamron 35mm to 150 f2 to 2.8. I think that this essentially changes the game for the Sony full frame system. But that's the video. If you guys have any more questions, leave those questions down in the comments below, and I will do my best to answer them. This is a boy named Jamil. I'm Jamil, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.